Welcome into the sacred space of three spiritual besties. Grab a seat and join us for raw and unfiltered conscious conversations.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Conscious Conversations with your hosts, Brittany.
Nicole. And Ashley.
And today we have a bit of a special little spooky conversation to have with you guys. In the spirit of the Halloween holiday coming up, we wanted to talk about everything paranormal, all paranormal activities that we've kind of experienced in our individual lives, or maybe even some that we've crossed paths with. Who knows? So I struggled when me and the girls were talking about this episode. I was like, I have nothing to contribute to this because I don't have that. That doesn't happen to me. I don't experience these things. So I did a little bit of research, and what I came up with was paranormal activity refers to the events or phenomena that falls outside the realm of scientific explanation. This can include experiences such as ghosts, poltergeist activities, telepathy, other supernatural occurrences. People often associate paranormal activity with entities like spirits or otherworldly beings, and it typically challenges our understanding of the natural world. So, with that being said, I'm so excited to start this conversation. Nicole, do you want to start? Ash, do you want to start? Where does this little spooky journey begin for you guys?
I can start. So I've had a lot of interesting things happen here and there, but I have to say a lot of my paranormal activity was very centered around when I was a child. I grew up with my mom's side being very spiritually connected. We would go to houses and try to like feel out the ghosts, or they would take pictures and we would go and develop them and like try and see ghosts like in the pictures. And I know a lot of stories of theirs that I can share, but one story that always kind of brings chills to me, and I know personally it was my grandfather, so there's not a lot of fear associated with it just because I felt like this loving welcoming presence when it occurred. But there's a couple things. So my Mimi had a trailer and I was sitting in the trailer and there was a TV show on. So I was sitting and watching TV, and then all of a sudden the TV goes to static. And I'm like, okay, that's super weird. Let me just get the remote. Like, this is interesting. And then in the static, I saw like a shape forming, and I'm like, WTF? I'm probably like 10 years old. What is happening? So I grabbed the remote and I'm like, this is super weird. So then the TV comes back on, and I'm like, okay, whatever. That's fine. That's normal. And then I sit back down and it started again. So I screamed to my Mimi because I'm freaked out, and she runs and she's like, oh, that's your grandfather. I'm like, oh, and she experienced so much. That was her partner. She experienced so much activity from him. And then there was one time where she and I stayed a lot with her, and we went to bed, we woke up, and there was wording scratched into the door on
No.
on the bathroom door that you could literally read. It's just like stuff like that. So my grandfather was very much like spirit in earth, able to manipulate stuff and communicate in that way. And there's just a lot of different things that he's done over the years. Like, he's a spirit that I can have, like, probably the most heavily felt for me spirit that I can feel safely for me, because I don't like mediumship. I don't go out like seeking the spirits anymore, but I'm like getting chills talking about it with you guys.
Wait, what did the words say? Do you remember?
I don't remember. I wish
Oh,
I did. I should have asked my Mimi.
oh hell no.
But I
Oh my
remember it was
goodness.
something like, oh, of course, like he would say that. Or there
Oh,
would be
okay.
random like pine cones in the house, and he was a logger. Like, there would just be so
Oh.
much random stuff from him.
Okay, if you remember or if Mimi remembers the words, we gotta post it for the viewers. We gotta what did the back of the door say? I have to know. That is so wild. Oh my God. How old were you when this stuff happened?
Oh, I was probably in like middle school age.
Okay.
Because my Mimi and my great aunt, like, they would do this for fun. Like, my great aunt would sit on swings and then just all of a sudden be like pushed by spirits. Like, they're very connected.
Oh my gosh.
And that's just something I grew up with being kind of like normal. So when I was experiencing it, I was like, okay, yeah, this is fine. This is like my grandfather. But then when I started getting my gifts and realizing how spirits could really navigate communication with me, it was really overwhelming. So I personally don't really do mediumship just because of how much I'm able to perceive, and it's just overwhelming for me.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Ooh, okay. I have to say this. Okay. Like it's interesting because it's funny because I'm the one that like I'm put my practice out there that I work with demons, right? Which people are like, oh my gosh, demons. Listen, they're a cakewalk compared to these damn spirits that roam around. Okay. I get scared. I don't like it, freaks me out. I don't like talking to spirits for the most part, but it's just so funny. And I don't like watching scary movies. I can't do it. Like I'm such a chicken shit, you guys. This is why I tell you when I'm trying to change your perspective of demons, they're much nicer. Sometimes they can be than some of these spirits out here. But Nicole, I'm excited to hear. I know you were excited about this episode. What do you have? Because I may be crying in a corner. Just cue me in, okay?
Yeah, so I have tons of experiences with human spirits. And when you were just talking, Brittany, in the beginning about the the definition of paranormal, I had a memory because I was thinking earlier when I was making my notes of what was my first experience. You speaking in the intro actually brought up my actual first experience. And I was in like first or second grade and I stayed at my friend's house and she's like, "Oh yeah, ghosts are here." And I'm like, "Huh? What?" And I'm not kidding. Spoons would fly across her kitchen. Doors would open and close just in one night of staying there. And I was a kid. Um, and so that was definitely a very interesting experience and remembering that is kind of cool to remember what like my first real experiences were.
And you just stuck that out. You just stayed in the house and slept.
Yeah.
You are so brave.
Yeah, it didn't feel like scary, which is interesting to say because I've had some really terrifying experiences. And I've also had some really good experiences with human spirit. So it kind of, it all depends. And again, that's where like it's kind of cool. Like our past episodes have talked about like putting up boundaries and what you accept and don't accept. And then our future episode is talking about discernment, and that plays a role into like how these spirits are coming to me and what they are, and then discerning, is it good? Is it bad? Is it actually who I think it is? So it's really, there's a lot that kind of goes into it. Is there any kind of experience you would like to hear about? Because I feel like I have a lot to share.
So as you were okay, so your first memory of something was watching at your girlfriend's house and seeing doors open and close. And as you're a child experiencing those things, what does that feel like for you? Like, how do you deal with those things as a child? And even going forward in life, like, how do you not have this crippling fear? Because that is terrifying. Like, even just hearing about it, and as you're talking to me, and you're like, oh, I remember blah, blah. And I was like, is there one behind me? Can you guys look? I'm so scared.
I feel like as a kid, you're so much more open. It doesn't scare you as much. When I was younger, and I think back like on my childhood, I was surrounded by spirits all the time, and I just never really understood that that's what they were. It literally was just like a group around me. I think I just had that natural, I wasn't scared of it. And then as I got older, more scary things did happen. And then just that kind of made me want to not experience that anymore. In a sense, I turned that gift off for a while. And then I had my son, and it was like, hey, we're back, different experiences.
So in the beginning of it, or can you talk a little bit more about something like one of your let's start one of the scarier, I guess,
Okay.
instances.
So when I was about 14, 13, 14, we had moved into a house, and this house was extremely haunted. And some of the experiences were me and my friend, we were having a sleepover. She was staying at my house, and I had like one of those down comforters. So when you see an impression, if somebody sits on it or puts a hand on it, it leaves an impression. And we were laying in bed, and she's like, "I can't lift my legs." And I'm like, "Huh?" And then I felt it. And it literally felt like somebody was laying across our legs, and you could see the imprint of a body laying across our legs. So that was one of the other ones that I had in that house was like I woke up like being choked, and you could see this like raggedy old man, and he was just like screaming in my face. And so those were like, what do you do? I mean, I'm 14, 15 years old. The only thing I can do is kind of like come back to myself, and be like, no, stop. This isn't, I don't like that. And really just kind of like standing up, for yourself when, a spirit comes on too strongly. A lot of times too, when spirits know that you can perceive them, they will flock to you because they get excited.
Mhm.
Again, there's also like, well, you set your boundaries of like what you're okay with, what you're not okay with. So those were, two of the more intense experiences.
And like in those moments where you can't move your body, like how do you snap yourself out of that? Is it a thing that you can snap yourself out of? Because in a sense, you're kind of, are you giving energy? Are you allowing them to do those things to you in a sense by not having those boundaries up? Like, how do you think that works? And also, I have another, I'm very inquisitive this episode, you guys. So I'm very sorry. I'm so curious about this. Why do you think these spirits do that? Like, what is the purpose of it?
Well, some spirits were just malicious in life, and that carries on into their energy. They enjoy that. Some just, who knows, really, right? I think it all depends too, like on the person, as far as like if you feel like you're in a situation where you can't move or you're kind of stuck. For me, it's like panic sets in, but then the fight kicks in because I'm like, no way. Like I'm fighting. Even if it's I can't move, like my mind, my energy, it's fighting back to regain whatever back to me.
That's
Um,
really good. That's
mm,
good advice too, if you're ever in a situation like that. You do. I find for myself when I meet new demons or new entities that come around, the ones that typically you hear a little bit more about that you're supposed to be afraid of, they'll show up like that. And it is kind of to test your discernment. So a lot of the times I think that they do show up like that, but then once you learn to face them in a certain way, they understand like, okay, you can go forward with whatever it is, whatever the lesson is, or whatever it is they're there to assist you. So I think with human spirits, what I've found in just a very few interactions that I've had with them is that they kind of just want to be heard. And I have trouble doing human mediumship because when I'm communicating whatever the spirit is saying to the person, it's like they just want to talk about themselves and they want to say the things that the human already knows. So I'm like, okay, well, why are you saying these things? And it's typically like to kind of get the person or the family member or whoever to understand that the spirit is actually communicating with them. So do you think that these more malicious ones, they're just kind of like you're in their space and they want to reclaim their space and they want you out? Is there a way to make peace with those things? How would you go about doing that? Were you ever able to do anything like that? Or Ash, do you have any experience with that type of thing? Or even opinion here would be totally fine.
I think for me, I don't like going to secondhand shops because of that. People will come in and be irritated that their stuff's there, and I can sense that. And then they just want to tell me like what they did with that item, and they don't want it like being sold. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. I don't know really how to help you. That's also why dolls creep me out. Some dolls have soul fragments, and I do not mess around with that. I'm so creeped out by that that I cannot deal with dolls. The fact
Mm.
that you have a fragment of a soul inside of you is just bizarre to me to begin with. So I energetically am like, do you want your soul fragment like going somewhere? Like I can help. No, they just are okay chilling like the doll. And that's completely fine. I think for me, a lot of my paranormal activity and standing up to these excuse me, has just been like, I don't mess with you.
Oh,
I have a very like, no, absolutely not kind of vibe. And I definitely haven't had anything like Nicole shared happen to me before, or I might have a very different perspective on it. I think the most I might be able to feel like sometimes a spirit of a cat lay on the bed, and that's fine because it's a cat. Like that's more, it's and then one physical thing that I felt was when I went to Salem, I was in the Hawthorne Hotel, and that's based on like a boat and a ship. And I could literally feel like the hotel kind of rocking like a boat would energetically. But I didn't have any like spirits come up to me, but I made it straightforward to the universe that I was not wanting that. So if I was more open, like maybe something would have happened. People have had so much happen in that hotel because it's haunted. But I told them I do not want that happening for me. at all. No,
Mm.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is very much like your boundaries and what you want. And like, as far as like human mediumship, like it does take a lot of practice as to how you perceive what they're communicating, and then also like discerning what actually you should do for them or with
Yeah.
them. It's not just like, oh, they're coming to me, let me help them move on. Well, that might not be what they're coming to you for. They might be just trying to convey something or to help somebody. And again, it's up to you to decide if you want to do that. You could say, thank you for telling me, but I do not, I don't pass those messages along, whatever the case may be. Sometimes, again, spirits will come because they can tell that you can perceive them. And then, so if you don't want to, it's okay. They'll just find in a sense, they'll find somebody else, you know?
Yeah,
Uh,
and they will. That's the thing too. I think that there's kind of more of a polite way to go about it if they're polite to you when they show up, right? You can politely just say, "I'm so sorry, like I can't help you with that." But even if you have a friend that does, like I have a lot of friends that are in death witchery, but when I'm near a cemetery, if I feel something come in, I'm like, "Nope, go to such and such. They'll help you. I'm so sorry." I just can't do it. Like, I'm just so afraid and I don't know why. But I want to talk more about your experiences, but I want to kind of break it up a little bit with this theory that I have and get your guys' opinion, okay? So I went to in Southern California, we have this ship called the Queen Mary in Long Beach. And it's supposed to be this huge, like haunted ship. I could not tell you why it's haunted. I didn't look into the history of it. So please don't come at me when I'm like, I don't think it is haunted. But
Would
when
it
I
have
was
pirates on it? Because I kept just seeing pirates before you literally said something.
sis, it could have had pirates on it. It couldn't have. It could have had an ancestor of mine. I wouldn't know. I truly don't.
I'm like, why do I keep seeing pirates? And you're like, so there's this ship in Southern California. I'm like, oh my gosh.
I think you're psychic.
I might be a little psychic.
You're a little bit. But I came up with this theory. I was doing a little bit of deep thinking, right? And I was like, I wonder, do you guys know what an egregore is? Okay, for those who don't know it, it's an energy that a group of people can make up and it becomes a spirit in its own, right? So if you want a very simple version of an egregore, you could think of the tooth fairy, the Easter bunny, any of those types of things. So when you think of the energy of this thing, you can relate it to this one thing. So I thought, and again, if I didn't explain that very well, you Google, okay, Google can be your best friend. Look it up if that didn't suffice. Okay. I'm just trying to live my best spooky life over here. Okay. So anyways, so if what my thought behind this is, because we were going to the Queen Mary and I wanted to tap into the energy of it before we went. And so, of course, I did. And I'm like, it just doesn't feel very haunted. Like, it doesn't feel haunted to me. I don't know. Like, I don't know. So then I got onto this like kick of like, what if it's just like an egregore that people have created? Because maybe one person who was a little bit more sensitive had a ghost pop up to them and they were like, oh my God, it's haunted. And then word of mouth traveled around and now it's become this huge egregore of just energy, and I hope I'm not offending anybody by this. Like if you have family members that passed away on the Queen Mary, whatever the history is of it, please just forgive me. This is just my UPG, my own personal thoughts and opinions on this, okay? But I'm wondering if a lot of places that are deemed haunted, if like, so for instance, when you think about going to a graveyard, when I go to a graveyard, I don't pick up a lot of spirits. I truly don't. I don't know a lot of spirits that want to hang out in a graveyard. They typically want to hang out with their friends and their families. Is there a difference between, and how do you discern between a spirit and an egregore? And is it possible that a lot of these places that are deemed haunted are actually not that haunted and people just say that they are?
Kind of like Sedona being a vortex. That's
Girl,
a topic for another time.
that is a
It popped
topic
in
for
my
another time,
mind.
but
I traveled there and I'm like, this is no vortex. For me, spirits have souls.
mhm,
Easiest to find thing. I can see your soul. I know you're a spirit. If I don't see a soul, I know you're a facade, an illusion of a fake energy. Because to me, in my belief system and in my practice, all sentient beings have souls.
mhm.
I don't personally believe like you lose your soul if you do something bad or you're deemed to eternally in flames, soulless. Even they have souls there. you know, that's my own personal belief system, though.
What do you think, Nicole?
Yeah, why not? It's definitely possible that energy beings or thoughts are created by humans themselves, right? I mean, we always say like manifestation and creation. Of course. Of course you can create something out of the fear of it, out of stories from it. It's absolutely possible. For me, when I've dealt with human spirits, it's not always like in a mediumship. They just like pop in and I either like don't have the time or space to deal with it. I'm still, always learning, how I perceive things, how I get information. And, like I've always, like you see something out of the corner of your eye, it's like, what was that? Sometimes to me, it's for some reason it's clearer than other times. Sometimes I see like a very clear person in front of me, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I'm just getting information and in my ear. For example, like Ash, I had made a gift for her and for her family. And while I was making it, messages started coming through. And part of me is like, I feel like I'm making this up. Like, I don't know. Like, none of this makes any sense to me. And when I passed the messages along to Ash, she's like, oh yeah, that's my grandfather. And it was so peaceful, like the energy you can just the more you experience it, the more you see some of just the beauty in it. I'm not saying, oh, go and look for dead people, but when you have just such a genuine connection and spirit around, it's comforting, it's validating, it's not manipulative, and it's not out there to harm anyone. It's truly to support the humans on the physical plane who are still here. So I think that's just something really, really beautiful.
I think that's why I had such a hard time when my mediumship really started going, because my grandfather was like the only thing I had to connect to like the spirit and like ghost or whatever, and he is such a like peaceful, kind energy. And then I started perceiving some of these like really like denser, or for lack of better terminology, like desperate for assistance kind of energies that wouldn't leave me alone, were draining my energy. And that's why I kind of just chose to not do mediumship personally, just because I felt like that wasn't the best way to conserve or utilize my energy. So I would say a lot of my paranormal experiences now are probably, with a majority of them being with like angels or dragons or some sort of like extraterrestrial energy. I mean, my goodness, I was doing a live with angels and they made my internet blow up. I had no reason for my modem to literally explode and smell super hot. My husband's an electrician, so believe me, I had him look at the wires and make sure like everything was fine. But the frequency was so strong that the Wi-Fi signal couldn't handle it. So I just have like random stuff like that happen for me a lot. Like I'll wake up from sleeping and be kind of like mid hallucination visualization of energies just like in my room from like a dream. Or there was a couple nights in a row, like 6 months ago, where I just kept seeing like Doctor Strange kind of ancient geometric shapes in my room while sleeping. And I had to keep like the lights on because like I don't know what is going on here, but things are getting really, really intense. A lot of my paranormal activity wouldn't necessarily be with like spirits specifically, but I feel like a lot of like the animals, like I feel like, I don't know, this is kind of a bizarre perspective, but like crows, I really believe are messengers. And I think they oftentimes bring me messages from like other realms too. Cause I'm like not really fully open to listening to everybody, but I will listen to those birds. I will listen to a crow all day.
I love that. So there's two things I want to talk about really quick. I learned this way of kind of helping yourself for those people who do perceive human spirits or just paranormal activity in general and aren't really open to it or don't want a lot of it coming to them at once. You can put an easy way to put protections up. One of my mentors taught me this. Basically, what you do is you go to your spiritual team. So for myself, I went to the one that I can mention, which is, of course, who I bring up every time. So sorry, Lucifer. And I said to him, if there are human spirits that want to speak with me, I would like to ask you to almost vet them. And the reason I did that was because actually I just started experiencing human spirits coming in not too long ago. And you two were actually the first two that I kind of started talking to about it, where I was getting these, just like in the middle of the day, I would get flashes of these people's faces in my head. And I was like, well, that was random. That was like weird. Who the heck is that? I've never seen this person, or I don't know this person personally, and then I do like the mundane over magical thing where I'm like, oh, I could have just seen them in passing and, their faces stuck in my head. But then when I started realizing actually what it was there was a spirit that came in, and I'll never forget him because he was the first time I like snapped me into like understanding what it was. But he was like looking at me like through his eyebrows, and like he had like this evil look on his face. And it's like, the thing is like I'm not really afraid of a lot, but when you look at me like that, I'm not going to be afraid of you. You're not going to like it. So I remember getting really fucking mad, excuse my language, getting really fucking mad, and having that energy towards that spirit and being like, oh hell to the no, get the f out of my face. Don't ever do that to me again. And just being so stern in my energy and being like, F off, don't ever look at me like that, really helped me to understand the power that I had over what I could and couldn't allow in my energy, right? So what I did from there was I went to Lucifer and I asked him, like, I need you to be in charge of these human spirits, or not even just, it can be anything. It doesn't have to be specific to humans, but the one that you go to in your practice that it could be an ancestor, it could be an angel, it could be anything like that. Go to them and ask them to set up a system for you. Please, if there's something important that a spirit needs to tell me, please vet them and then allow the message to come through at such and such time. Or think of it as like in Beetlejuice, how they take the numbers and then they gotta all stand in line. I'm not even kidding you, set it up like that, where it's like there's a number system. So if I'm thinking that I have a little extra energy and I choose to help a spirit, I will go in and say, I am taking spirit number 1 today, and go from there. But other than that, that's the safest way that I've learned to kind of keep things at bay. There are still things that pop up here and there that will seep between the cracks, and that's totally fine, because if there's something, for instance, I had something happen a few weeks ago where there was a few energies that they're on the do not call list pop up in my room, and they were trying to get a message to me for another practitioner, which is fine. But immediately I started panicking in my head and in my heart, and I could feel like they were just there to relay a message, but because I knew who they were and I knew of their lore, it freaked me out. So I immediately called in Lucifer and was like, I can't deal with this right now. Please help me. And then I could just immediately feel like my body start to relax, my mind start to relax. And then it was like I could catch my breath and then deal with it in the morning. And so I did. And so I went into meditation with them together because I trust Lucifer to help me and guide me through those things. So that is another way to help with any kind of occurrences that you may have that you don't like. And that's what works for me. So I don't know. I think Nicole has a more physical practice than I do. And so I would wonder if something like that could happen or help her. And I guess the only way you could do that or test the theory is to try.
It's very interesting. I feel like when I was having so many paranormal experiences before, I had no idea. Like I didn't know anything. All I knew was I was having these experiences and they were scary or off, or I just had no idea. Whereas now I feel so much more equipped to handle it, and that's just through being on this journey and figuring out like what works for me, what doesn't work for me. My big thing has always been, if I don't like it, I tell them to leave. And it's usually like never an issue. Sometimes it requires a little bit more of like a cleansing, just because, they can be stubborn and like try and hide and be like, oh, I'll just come back later. And that's not gonna work. So those are things, now I just handle it so much differently than I did before. Like before I was really like scared, and now I'm not as scared. When I experience it, it just happens so quickly And it's like, I'm just walking down my hallway. Like, I don't know why you're here. What are you doing? It's not like I'm sitting in this meditation and I opened up space and I'm calling in spirits. Like, no, I'm just making the bed. I'm vacuuming. Like, leave me alone. It is very much of like dealing with it in the sense of like either come back later or leave. So it really all depends.
So, can we safely say that part of mediumship is definitely, it goes along the lines of these paranormal experiences. So, my question to the two of you, I know Ash, you do quite a bit of channeling. How do you shut that off at the end of the day to not experience these things, or do things happen to you whether you shut it off or not?
I would say for me, I'm not open energetically to anybody but my guides
Okay.
when I'm not actually intentionally tuning into somebody. So similar to how you have Lucifer kind of be that buffer for you or checker for you with
Yeah.
energies, I have my guides be that with channels. So when just going about my day, if someone wants me to have a message for somebody else, I don't do that. I'm not a paper boy. I'm not bringing the newsletter to other people, and I don't know if they're open to it. And I'm huge about consent. If they're not coming and asking me, I'm not going to give it unless I'm really close with them.
Hmm.
But oftentimes, being a channeler, you'll just receive a random message, and I have a platform that has about 150,000 people on it. I cannot have everybody's guides coming to me. So I have to have super strong boundaries. And the way that I've been able to navigate that is that I just don't allow it to happen if I'm not specifically intending it to. So if you've sent an energy exchange, that's a way that it pings me to kind of like let that energy in. Or if it's someone I know, my guides will let me know, like, hey, they might need a little assistance. You could reach out. And sometimes if I don't have the energy, I don't even reach out because it's very much based on, my energy levels. I first started trying to help everybody and burnt myself out at the beginning. So I had to learn to be really solid and strong with those boundaries. And, sometimes the messages that they need are a part of them learning to receive them themselves as well. Just because I know them doesn't mean I'm meant to share them.
Hmm.
So that's an interesting part to navigate with like the channeling. When I first started working with extraterrestrials, they were constant. So that was definitely a big adjustment for me. I would really tell them like we're having a meeting. That's the only times kind of energy. They taught me so much meditating with them, but I had to have the boundary of like you're only allowed kind of during meditation because this is distracting from my life, like my
Hmm.
human enjoyment.
I love that. It makes me think about like when I used to do the markets and I would do readings for people. And at first I was doing them kind of like for free. And I very quickly was drained. I think the first 2 weeks that I had done it, I was there one day a week and it was like 40 people would come. And I was like exhausted. I was so drained. So I started having to have that exchange of even just $1, to help with the energies. And then as I was doing it more and more, I would realize I didn't have the energy that day for people to be coming in to the tent and to the space, like even though I was there. So I started asking my guides to help with that, to like set it up where whoever was coming in was actually like meant to be there, and also to help it like not drain me so much. But I also say too, like you, Brittany, talking about Lucifer and Ash talking about her guides, I turn to source a lot. So source energy helps me discern and figure out what to do most of the time. And if I don't know, that's like just always my go-to. I always ask source if I'm just not sure.
How can you guys tell the difference between the entities that come into your space? What do their energies feel like to you? Or how do you know the difference between a spirit, a human spirit, an animal spirit, extraterrestrial, a demon, an angel? How do you know?
I think that comes a lot with like your gifts, right? So like I have clairvoyance, see it in my mind's eye, but I also feel it. I've set it up with my own energy and my team that certain energies are felt in certain spots of my body, if that makes sense. We have the ancestors on the right, I have infernals on the left, guides on my back. Higher self is like my face and head. So it's really kind of working within yourself and in your own practice to just like figure out how you want to be able to tell what's what.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. I really would have said the same thing, to be quite honest with you. I within my channel have different pathways, so it depends on the pathway is specific for whomever it is. If it's a animal, a spirit, which I say but don't allow, so kind of ignore that part, but an angel or a dragon or whatever energy it is, it comes in on a different pathway for me. Or think of it kind of like as they take a different like lane into my consciousness, into my channel. I would say, a big part of me for the beginning of my journey was learning how to be, just due to the nature of how I work with people, remove all illusions, masks, mirages, and things of that sort, because I do work within spaces with people who are heavily in light work and are heavily doing a lot of denser energy work for the collective. And they would encounter energies pretending to be one thing, but we're actually not. And we call those tricksters. And they are not like human spirits. There are different kinds, there's variations of them. But a big part of me navigating and understanding how an energy could look like something, but also simultaneously feel like something totally different, definitely shifted my gifts to be able to discern immediately what kind of an energy it was. And I would say that utilizes all the clairs for me. My hearing, feeling, seeing, or knowing all goes into me discerning like what kind of an energy I'm working with, if it's actually like the person's guides like I'm intending. There's a lot of different avenues that I've taken to kind of put that into place. And I think that would be a really cool future episode for us and for the listeners to really teach like protections and boundaries. And that's a plan for us in the future. So we'll get more into that at that point, but I definitely agree. It's based on the gifts for sure.
Okay. Does anybody want to share any other stories or experiences they have? Have you guys, I know with abilities, we can experience spirits and other worldly entities in different ways, but have you guys visually been able to see anything, or is it more just like energetic in your mind's eye type of a thing?
Like, do you mean physically see them like walking around?
Yeah.
One night I was taking out the trash and like my neighbor's driveway was like next to mine. It was like a shared space. And I'm taking out the trash, and on the other side of his truck, I see a man walking the other way with like a bowler hat. And I was like, who is that? Where is he going? Like, what was that? And it was just so like he was just walking along. And our houses, like my garage was actually like the original building on the property, and it was like 100 years old. And I'm like, who's this guy walking around in a bowler hat? And it was just so it was very unexpected, but it was like I could have just reached out and like touched him. He was right there. So that was a and he didn't acknowledge me. He just was going about his business, and I went about my business and went inside. So
I had an experience. I've had two experiences where I've actually physically seen stuff with my eye, which is funny because I'm like, I don't experience this stuff. But when I first started getting sober and into my spiritual path, a lot of the times you'll experience shadow people when you're going through a lot of the, I don't know, I guess harder work that you have to do or all the harder things that you have to get through. You'll experience these shadow people that kind of just linger around. I've yet to find anybody that's experienced them in a good way, so I do with that information what you will. But I remember one night I was laying in bed, and for some reason I woke up and like I just saw this huge shadow standing over like at my feet, right? And so I did, the typical thing where I pulled the blankets over my head and was like, nope, that didn't happen. And then I heard something in my ear, and I was like, okay, so I looked, and then, this shadow being was huge. Like I was like looking up at it, but then as soon as I heard something rustling around, I opened my eyes and my daughter was there and the shadow thing was gone. That freaked me out. That was probably one of the things I'll never forget. But there is also something really attached to that house. I don't know what it was because I did the cleansings and I did just about everything I could to clean the energy of that house, and it just would not go away. My partner and I had a lot of arguments in that house. And then as soon as we moved out of it, there was like huge leaps and bounds in our relationship where we started repairing a lot of stuff. So it's very interesting. And then the second time I experienced something was actually when I was heavily working with Hecate at the time, and I would do nightly meditations, and I would do Dipnon with her, and she was actually the first entity that I acknowledged in my practice. And I remember going into meditation, and I had all my cards out, and I'm doing all my spiritual medium stuff that I was like, you got to have it all perfect and right, so I'm sitting there in meditation, and I'm doing the chanting, and I have the incense going, and I have it all going, and then I like just get this like overwhelming sense of like, just open your eyes. So I opened my eyes, and on the left side, like I just kept my head straight, but I could see at the corner of my eye this figure, but it was almost like a woman walking in like a smoky robe. And I freaked out, and I was like, oh my God. And Hecate is, if you've ever worked with her, if you've ever experienced her energy, she is one of the most powerful energies I've ever come across. She's incredible. And so when she shows up, there's no mistaking who she is. And I just remember like being like, oh, like frozen, like, oh, I can't move, So I just like closed my eyes again. And then I felt her like walk around my bed and come, oh, I'm getting chills, come and like place her hand on me, like on the top of my head. And she was like, it's okay. And I was like, like freaking out. But the thing that, okay, so with that, my dog was barking like crazy on the outside of my door. So I'm like, okay, validation, right? So then, I go through that process, it ends, and then I live in an area where, coyotes are not that uncommon in California. They're pretty much everywhere. And I live in an area where there's some woods behind me. So, we get coyotes in our neighborhood often. But that same night, 3 a.m. hits, and I'm jolted out of bed by a coyote on my front porch howling. And then the pack comes in howling behind it. I'm like, there was nothing that they could have eaten there. Like, why are they on my porch? So I'm like, okay, that's got to be more validation that what I experienced was actually what I experienced. So that was like things that I'll never forget that are really, really cool. And it goes back again to like allowing yourself to be open to the idea of these like paranormal activities. Like, they don't have to be so like scary and fearful, I suppose, even though I'm the biggest chicken on the face of the planet. Like, when I think back to those things, I'm like, oh, okay, you can experience these things and be okay. You're not gonna die.
Yeah. So I had one final question and then close it up for the day or whatever. But I was wondering if there's one haunted place that you guys ever want to visit. Uh, For me, I would love to go to Zach Bagans' Haunted Museum. I can't even imagine the energy that's in there, the things that are in there. Terrifying, but I'm just so curious at the same time.
Tell me a little bit more about this museum, Nicole. What's in there?
Oh, everything. He has,
No.
yeah, oh, he's got everything. Artifacts from everywhere. His newest thing, I think he has like the brain or something from one of like the most prolific serial killers. Oh yeah, I mean, there's mirrors of Bela Lugosi, there's dolls of all sorts, um, different artifacts from all over the world that he's collected.
Yeah, I don't fuck around and find out like that.
She's like, absolutely not ever.
No.
I'm good.
Sorry. Probably why I
Um,
haven't visually seen much. Like, I'll see stuff in trees or the clouds, but not
Mhm.
nothing lets me see it like that. I really, when you ask me if I wanted to go somewhere haunted, like, I feel like the universe is lucky I went to like Salem or something, and
oh,
I did not enjoy the energy there. So I think I don't really seek it out. If I had to pick a place, I really enjoy like the history of the Titanic, but how am I gonna go visit I can do a replica.
So no, so there's the Titanic Museum, and Ghost Adventures actually did an episode there. documenting like footsteps and stuff. So there's a whole museum with all different artifacts that are from the Titanic, like pieces of the Titanic are in there and preserved.
I think do you know where was that? Do you remember where they happened? No, I went to a Titanic museum, I think in like Tennessee, but I don't think it had like actual, like I put my hand in like the water,
Wow.
like they had the water be the temperature.
Yeah.
And then they gave you this little like boarding pass, and then at the end you have to see if you survive or not.
Oh my gosh.
That's
You
morbid.
get this like
That is
boarding pass. It's like
morbid.
you're this person. See if you survived at the end. I did, by the way. That was exciting for me. But you could not take pictures in there. So I'm like wondering if maybe it did have legit stuff because it was.
Yeah.
I just saw something weird on my camera. I don't want to
I
see
100% saw
I
that.
saw that for sure.
100%
saw that
saw that.
too. Oh no.
I think you gotta go. You gotta go back. That's crazy. For me, I'm not like I want to go to a haunted place, but I think just places that have a lot of history behind them, like the Colosseums would be cool to see. You know, there's a lot of spirits there. A lot of like ancient history, like burial sites would be cool to see. I don't know. That stuff also freaks me out because I'm like, just gets my blood going. And then where I really, 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 really would love to go is I would love to go, you know, I'm from the West Coast. So I also will say this. I think there's so much more activity on the East Coast than there is the West Coast. Like it has to be the history, you know what I mean? It has to be the history, but I would more like to visit places with like a lot of the history behind it. Like again, the Colosseum would be really cool to see. I would even really like to go to like the pyramids.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, go visit the pharaohs. That would be so cool. I'm not really into the Titanic thing because I just feel like that is really sad and I would probably just cry the whole time because I'm a baby too. Not only am I chicken, but I cry all the time. So I probably wouldn't be able to make it through that, but
I cry a lot too. It's okay. I feel like the pyramids would be super cool, but we'd probably get like portaled away or something.
Yeah.
oh yeah. Well, I was just looking into it with my sister-in-law, but there's like the ones in Mexico too. And I'm like, that would be cool to go see. It's a little bit closer to me.
Cool.
I went to like these ancient burial grounds in New Mexico where they lived on like mounds, and they were like telling us the history of it, and it was like this full ancient civilization, and you would like hike up these mounds, and they would just, if you had a higher mound, you were like considered a higher hierarchy, higher prestigious kind of person. But I recall the energy there feeling super powerful. So I like feeling the energy of more like the ground than the people, I think.
Yeah.
That's why when I went to Sedona, I was like, you do not feel like a vortex. I was so
Mhm.
shocked. Grand Canyon, now that feels like a vortex portal.
That's like, oof, God, like hills. That's like hills have eyes stuff out there. That freaks me out, man.
In the Grand Canyon?
Yes. Oh God.
yeah.
I'm not into that. No, thank you. I'm
You're
good.
only on the top of it. I definitely wouldn't hike it.
I definitely do like a helicopter ride just so I'm as far away as I can. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm good. I do also want to say this. Okay. So people worry about this is what I kind of want to close it up with, unless you ladies have anything else to say.
Mm-mm.
Okay. When we're thinking about this is like common sense to me, and I could be being a complete asshole about this. Feel free to call me out, of course. But my thoughts on these, like people who are scared, I have a lot of family members when I talk to them about these like interactions, right? They're like, oh my God, don't talk about it because they'll hear you. Or like they're like how earlier, Nicole, where I was like, is there a ghost behind me? You know what I mean? Clearly I know common sense tells me that's not going to happen. They're going to be anywhere that wherever the hell they want to be, they're going to be, you know? But I will say, like, every single person that has ever been born on this planet in history has died on this planet, you guys. So when you're thinking about these spirits and like they come and go as they please. They can do what they want. Just put your protections out there, put your boundaries out there, and don't worry about it too much. And just understand that we've existed all of these years and we're pretty okay. You know, Nicole has a little bit more trauma there. I'm sorry. Lower your little spiritual antenna there. But you know what I mean? Like, just when you're dealing with these things, try to use your discernment, use your common sense, and hopefully everything's going to be okay. And if not, call on your team where, you know, Lucifer he's a good protector. He'll be right there to help. I'm kidding. But
Just call
anyway,
1-800 Lucifer and you'll
1-800 Lucifer
be
will
connected.
protect. Yeah. Oh my God. That's gonna be a hotline now. Damn it.
I think that's why I feel the ground so strongly. Just to add something before we
Yeah.
do the outro, like the ground, like there's people in there, you know.
I honestly think about it all the time. Like if you think about literally every single person that has been born on this planet has died on this planet. So you're literally walking around burial sites everywhere you go. Some do have more activity, of course. Just be a decent, respectful human being. That's all you have to do to avoid maybe some troublesome encounters, you know?
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with you. And that's like one thing, if I, could give some advice to end with it, is it's scary when it happens at first and it's unexpected. It's up to you to decide what you want and what you don't want. And sometimes approaching it with fear makes it attract more of the things that will cause fear. Whereas if you approach it with respect and boundaries, being very clear, and also too, like getting the tools in your belt, like if you need to cleanse with Palo Santo or even like Florida water or anything of that nature, I mean, use it. It's there to be used to assist in keeping your energy field cleansed and clear and safe.
Mhm.
So that's, if I have any advice, that would be it.
Guys, I want to thank you for sticking around with this episode. It was a lot longer than expected. This was supposed to be a short episode, but I'm happy to dive into this. And for the listeners, if you guys want to chime in, send us your stories. What experiences do you guys have? Comment on our social medias and leave some stories for us to read. We would love to read some of your experiences on our podcast too. We always appreciate your feedback. Appreciate you coming in and tuning in every 2 weeks or so to listen to our podcast. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode and expanding within conscious conversations. We now close the sacred space with love and gratitude. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay connected.